Welcome to the part 5 of the Ruby metaclasses screencast. This is the last one based on why the lucky stiff uh, material. So let's get started. So the two things before we get started. One is the class or objects. This means they can hold instance variables, and metaclasses hold instance methods. When attached to an object, these methods become singleton methods. These methods intercept calls before they trickle up the chain of inheritance. Okay, let's see an example. I'm just adding it to the array. So the class variables, you might already be knowing, actually begins with double at sign. So class variables are very easy to distinguish. Since they have two at symbols, there is no confusion. So the question is, what is the difference between using instance variables in a class itself versus using a class variable? Okay, that's what we are going to see right now. So I have an instance variable in this class, and I'll have another method. Let's say that method name is just call it greet. I'm accessing the variable var here. So let's see what happens. Add something here, and let's call the greet method. So this is what we get. It doesn't run when I try to access the instance variable in this class that was initialized using this class method. Now what if this was a class variable? The class method, I'm adding some stuff to it, and then I can access it. So how would I make it run this time? There it is. Now I'm able to access it. So the question is, it works if it's a class variable. If it's an instance variable, it doesn't work. So this illustrates the concept class variables can be referenced in instance methods if needed. In the previous case, we were not able to do it. Again, the meta classes comes into the picture since every class is stored in a meta class. So what this means is I can do this, it will still work. And also there is another way I can do this, which is basically having this singleton syntax. You can have this and have your add method defined inside of this. Implementation is the same. I can delete this. Let's run this. There it is. So basically, see how the meta class is being used. That method add is getting added to the meta class. All of these different syntaxes are essentially the same, doing the same thing. This particular syntax makes it very explicit. Okay, that's fine. Now, let's move on to something really interesting. I'm going to cheat a little bit here and copy the meta methods here. I'll briefly go over this thing because it uses instance eval and also is similar to this changing self episode also. So meta class basically accesses the meta class, and since all objects you define is going to extend from object, this is all these methods are available for any objects you define. And the meta eval takes a block as an argument, and what it basically does is evaluates that block in the context of the meta class. Okay, and I've done something similar, very similar thing in changing self episode. And this method, metadef, takes a name of a method and then the block. And what it does is defining a method by the name that you give and then passes it along the block that's going to be the instructions that will be executed for that particular method. And this method basically it calls meta eval in turn. It's evaluated. That method is defined in the context of the meta class. Okay, so we are basically adding methods to the meta class, and we are not going to be using this particular method. So I'm going to skip this. But let's see this powerful concept in action. So the example is going to be, let's change this example. It's a class method. I have a say method, takes a phrase, and since foo is basically object is the parent of foo, I have access to the metadef I have defined here. Okay, so I'm calling that metadef. I'm passing in a symbol and then a block. The block will consist of the instructions which will become the body of that particular method, say. In this case, it just returns the same phrase. It doesn't do much. Okay, now we have defined a class method, say, in foo, which takes a phrase and then it just returns the phrase. It's very simple method, but this new say class method is added to foo that can be used in class definition. Okay, so now what I want to do is create a subclass of foo. Let's just call it as foo sub. Extends from foo, and it says that's it. That is the phrase Bugs Bunny calling Earth over. Now let's say foo sub dot say, and it prints Bugs Bunny calling Earth over. So this is very declarative in nature. As you can see from the output, it's just this same method. Whatever you pass in, it just returns that as the result. So when I print the foosub.say, we get the string back. That string is getting output. So what's going on in the metadef? When a self.say is called with the phrase, metadef adds a new method called say to the foosub meta class. The cool thing is that the method is not added to the foo meta class, but to the derived class foosub. This is looking very simple, but it's very powerful. You can write simple class methods which will add class methods to a derived class. This is how Rails also has the subclass that you have models deriving from active record, which is declarative, and it provides a lot of features, adds a lot of features, methods to it during runtime. So the metadef, as you see, metadef takes a name and the block. In this case, what is self? When I call the say here, the value of self is actually foosub, right? It's foosub. When you call say in the context of foosub, you actually change the receiver. In that case, everything is getting executed in the context of the subclass. Okay. Since foosub also is kind of extending from this object, when this thing say is actually called, then we are evaluating the metadef. Everything is happening at runtime, and metadef it has this as the symbol say and takes a block, and it's going to evaluate in the context of this meta class, which means the self in our case is foosub. In the context of foosub, we instance evaluate that particular block. Okay, that's how this chain of methods are interacting with this particular foosub subclass of foo. This is a very powerful concept, very subtle and very easy to miss. And if you understand this concept, it becomes much easier to write declarative style program um, in your Ruby code and raise the level of abstraction. And this would look like keywords in your domain if you choose the words same as the jargon used by the domain experts. It becomes the keywords kind of a thing everybody can use as a way of communication between developers and between business users and developers. So that's it for this screencast, and if you enjoyed it, please recommend me on Working with Rails. Thank you. God bless.